Christopher Columbus and the discovery of America. In the annals of maritime exploration, few figures loom as large as Christopher Columbus. His voyages across the uncharted Atlantic Ocean in the late 15th century not only altered the course of history but also marked the dawn of the age of exploration. The 15th century was a pivotal era characterized by a fervent quest for new trade routes and territories. Christopher Columbus's daring expeditions forged a path that connected continents, reshaped economies, and precipitated profound cultural exchanges. This presentation delves into the intricate tapestry of Columbus's life, his monumental voyages, and their enduring impact on the world. Early life of Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus was born in 1436 in the maritime Republic of Genoa, Italy. His father, Domenico Colombo, was a wool weaver who also owned a cheese stand where young Christopher likely assisted. Despite his modest beginnings, Columbus was afforded an education that encompassed reading, writing, arithmetic, and, notably, geography and astronomy. His early fascination with the sea and exploration was evident. Genoa, being a significant trading port, exposed Columbus to sailors' tales of distant lands and the mysteries of the ocean. He honed his skills in navigation and cartography, disciplines that were crucial in an age where precise mapping was essential yet rudimentary. In his youth, Columbus undertook voyages throughout the Mediterranean Sea, gaining valuable seafaring experience. Records suggest he may have ventured as far as Chios in the Aegean Sea and possibly even reached England and Ireland, absorbing diverse navigational practices. The need for a new trade route. During the Middle Ages, Europe engaged in lucrative trade with Asia, importing silks, spices, precious metals, and other exotic goods via overland routes like the Silk Road. These routes were long, perilous, and subject to the whims of regional powers. The fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks in 1453 was a watershed moment. The Ottomans imposed exorbitant taxes and occasional blockades on European caravans and ships, rendering traditional routes economically unviable and dangerous. In response, maritime nations sought alternative sea routes. Portuguese explorers, under Prince Henry the Navigator, methodically charted the African coastline, inching closer to a sea path to the Indies. By the late 15th century, they had reached the Cape of Good Hope. Columbus proposed a bold alternative, sailing westward across the Atlantic to reach Asia. This concept hinged on two critical miscalculations: underestimating the Earth's circumference and overestimating the eastward extension of Asia. Nevertheless, his theories were rooted in scholarly works of the time, including those of Ptolemy and Marco Polo. Seeking support for the voyage. In 1484, Columbus petitioned King John II of Portugal to sponsor his westward expedition. However, Portuguese experts, adhering to the prevailing estimates of the Earth's size, deemed the plan impractical. Unbeknownst to Columbus, the king covertly dispatched a ship to test his theory, which returned unsuccessful due to adverse conditions. Faced with rejection and perceived betrayal, Columbus left Portugal with his son Diego, aiming to court the Spanish monarchy. Arriving in Spain in 1485, Columbus faced years of uncertainty. The Spanish sovereigns, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, were embroiled in the Reconquista, the campaign to expel the Moors from the Iberian Peninsula. Columbus's proposals were repeatedly deferred, and he faced skepticism from royal advisors who questioned his calculations and the feasibility of his plan. The turning point. In a pivotal moment of despair, Columbus sought refuge at the convent of La Rabida. There, he met Fray Juan Perez, the prior and former confessor to Queen Isabella. Perez, impressed by Columbus's conviction and knowledge, arranged for him to meet influential courtiers. Among them was Martin Alonso Pinzon, a seasoned mariner who would later captain the Pinta. Their support rejuvenated Columbus's efforts. Queen Isabella, persuaded by Perez's advocacy, agreed to a final review. Although initial negotiations faltered due to Columbus's lofty demands, noble titles and a percentage of revenues, Isabella ultimately consented, famously asserting that she would pledge her jewels to finance the voyage, though this was likely symbolic. Preparation for the first voyage. The capitulations of Santa Fe, signed on April 17, 1492, granted Columbus the titles of Admiral of the Ocean Sea, Viceroy, and governor-general of all discovered lands, along with 1/10 of all riches obtained. These terms were unprecedented for a non-noble. Recruitment proved challenging. Mariners were wary of the unknown vastness of the ocean sea, rumored monsters, and the possibility of falling off the Earth's edge. To assemble the necessary crew, royal decrees pardoned criminals willing to join, and pressures were applied on experienced sailors. The vessels were Santa Maria, a now approximately 62 feet in length, serving as the flagship; Pinta, a caravel, swift and smaller, around 56 feet long; Nina, another caravel, the smallest at about 50 feet, known for its agility. These ships were modest even by the standards of the time, underscoring the expedition's perilous nature. The first voyage begins. At dawn on August 3, 1492, the expedition set sail from Pylos. The atmosphere was laden with trepidation and hope. Families bid emotional farewells, uncertain if they would see their loved ones again. After a brief stop at the Canary Islands for repairs, particularly to the Pinta's rudder, the fleet ventured into the uncharted Atlantic on September 6. The voyage tested the limits of human endurance and leadership. The crew grew anxious as days turned into weeks without sighting land. The deviation of the compass needle, a phenomenon caused by the Earth's magnetic declination, alarmed the sailors. Columbus navigated these fears by adjusting his charts and maintaining two logs, one with the actual distance traveled and a falsified shorter distance to assuage the crew. Entering the Sargasso Sea, the ships were slowed by dense mats of seaweed. Sailors feared becoming ensnared or running aground on undiscovered shoals. Threats of mutiny surfaced, but Columbus's steadfast resolve and motivational assurances kept the expedition unified. Discovery of land. By early October, the mood shifted as signs of land emerged. Bird migrations, a carved stick, and coastal vegetation buoyed spirits. On the evening of October 11, Columbus observed a faint light resembling a moving torch, an indication of human habitation. At approximately 2 a.m. on October 12, lookout Rodrigo de Triana aboard the Pinta sighted a shoreline. The fleet had reached the New World, though they believed it to be the East Indies. Upon landing, Columbus, bearing the royal standard, performed a ceremony of possession, claiming the island for Spain and naming it San Salvador. The indigenous Lucayan people observed from a distance, initiating one of the most significant cultural encounters in history. Exploration of the New World. Believing he had reached islands off the Asian continent, Columbus referred to the inhabitants as Indios. The Europeans marveled at the unfamiliar flora and fauna, noting the absence of spices and gold they had anticipated. The fleet explored Cuba's northeastern coast, mistaking it for mainland China, and later reached Hispaniola, present-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic, which they thought might be Japan. Efforts were made to find riches, but with limited success. Tragedy struck on December 25, 1492, when the Santa Maria ran aground off Hispaniola. Using the remains of the ship, Columbus established a small fort named La Navidad, leaving 39 men behind with provisions and instructions to amass gold. Return to Spain. The return journey was perilous. Violent storms threatened to sink the Nina and Pinta. Fearing catastrophe, Columbus documented his findings in sealed reports cast into the sea in casks, hoping they might reach Spain even if he did not survive. Despite the odds, Columbus arrived in Palos on March 15, 1493. News of his discoveries spread rapidly, leading to an audience with Ferdinand and Isabella in Barcelona. Columbus presented the sovereigns with artifacts, gold trinkets, indigenous captives, and vivid descriptions of the lands. He was greeted with honors befitting a hero, solidifying his status as Admiral of the Ocean Sea. Subsequent voyages and challenges. Emboldened by success, Columbus embarked on a second voyage in September 1493 with 17 ships and approximately 1,200 men, including settlers, priests, and soldiers, aiming to establish a permanent colony and further explore. Upon returning to Hispaniola, Columbus found La Navidad destroyed and his men dead, victims of conflicts with the indigenous population exacerbated by the settlers' misconduct. The nascent colony faced internal dissent due to harsh conditions, disease, and Columbus's strict governance. Tensions with the Taino people escalated, leading to hostilities. The third voyage in 1498 led Columbus to Trinidad and the coast of present-day Venezuela. Notably, he realized he had encountered a continental landmass, though he still believed it was part of Asia. Discontent among colonists and reports of mismanagement prompted the Spanish crown to send Francisco de Bobadilla to investigate. In 1500, Bobadilla arrested Columbus, sending him back to Spain in chains, a stark reversal of fortune. Though Ferdinand and Isabella pardoned Columbus upon his return, their trust had eroded. His titles and privileges were curtailed, and administrative control over the new territories was removed. Final voyage and later years. Undeterred, Columbus undertook a fourth voyage in 1502, seeking a passage to the Indian Ocean. Exploring the coasts of Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama, he faced unrelenting storms, shipwreck, and resistance from indigenous communities. Shipwrecked on Jamaica for over a year, Columbus showcased ingenuity by predicting a lunar eclipse to secure assistance from the indigenous people. Rescue arrived in 1504. Upon his return, Columbus found that Queen Isabella, his primary patron, was gravely ill. Her death in November 1504 marked the end of royal favor. Suffering from arthritis and other ailments, Columbus spent his final years petitioning the crown for restitution of his titles and revenues. Christopher Columbus died on May 20, 1506, in Valladolid, Spain. His death was relatively unheralded, and he remained convinced that he had found a western route to Asia. Legacy of Christopher Columbus. Columbus's voyages had far-reaching consequences. He pioneered transatlantic navigation routes, paving the way for subsequent explorers like Amerigo Vespucci and Ferdinand Magellan. His expeditions demonstrated the feasibility of crossing the Atlantic, altering geographic understanding. It wasn't until later explorations that Europeans realized Columbus had encountered previously unknown continents. The term, America, first appeared in 1507, named after Amerigo Vespucci, who recognized that these lands were not Asia. The contact initiated by Columbus led to dramatic and often devastating impacts on indigenous societies. Diseases like smallpox decimated populations lacking immunity. European colonization efforts resulted in cultural disruption, exploitation, and significant loss of life. Modern scholarship critically examines Columbus's legacy. While acknowledging his maritime skills and daring, historians grapple with the ethical implications of his actions, including the enslavement and mistreatment of indigenous peoples. Debates persist over commemorations like Columbus Day, with calls to recognize indigenous experiences and contributions. Christopher Columbus remains a complex figure, both a visionary navigator and a contentious symbol of imperialism. His voyages undeniably reshaped the globe, ushering in an era of global exploration and exchange. As we reflect on his legacy, it's imperative to acknowledge both the advancements and the adversities that ensued, fostering a nuanced understanding of this pivotal epoch in human history. The age of exploration set humanity on a path of interconnectedness, for better and worse. Columbus's journeys remind us of the indomitable spirit of discovery and the profound responsibilities that accompany such endeavors.